Hello and welcome to my office and welcome to this Darwin's Medicine seminar. These seminars are about the life sciences industry, pharma, medtech, diagnostics, which I've worked in, researched and written about for over 40 years now. I focus on the question of why some companies are better at competing, better at competitive strategy than others. And my aim is to tell you something that's relevant, useful and that you've not heard before. So if I manage to do that, then please like, subscribe and share with your colleagues. If you'd like the published article that goes with this seminar, then please get in touch and I'll send it to you. Recently, a lot of my time has been taken up writing Brand Therapy 2, which is the new edition of my book about tools and techniques for creating and executing strategy in our industry. I've been encouraged and fascinated by the feedback to the first edition, especially readers who've said what they found most useful. Strikingly, almost everybody comments on the closing section of each chapter, which gives a pragmatic piece of advice about how to avoid the most common mistakes in the practice of executing brand planning. And one reader, who takes a surprising amount of interest in my research, asked how these strategizing screw-ups that happen in real life fit with my application of Darwinian evolution to the industry. Well, it's always nice to be asked about your work, so I wrote her a long answer to that, and I think that will be useful to you too. In southern Africa, there's a group of hunter-gatherer people called the San. They live in the hot, semi-arid savanna of the Kalahari. Now, it's a very different environment from the environment I'm used to working to, the air-conditioned meeting rooms where most pharma and medtech strategizing is done. Yet, both these environments are populated by the same species, Homo sapiens, trying to make a living in their different ways. And anthropologists who study the San report a degree of analysis ability and rationality and collective planning capabilities that would put a lot of brand teams to shame, in fact. They do this, of course, with spreadsheets and data sets, but they're remarkably effective at what marketers would call situation analysis and strategic planning and operational execution. They're remarkably good at something analogous to cross-functional team working too. Now, what does this mean? Well, it means that our species evolved to think strategically. Our Paleolithic environment selected 4 strategic thinking abilities. This is good news, but it raises an interesting question. It raises the question of why is it that some firms are both inefficient and ineffective at creating strong strategies when all the people doing it are evolutionarily evolved to do it? So if we evolve to strategize, why do we often make strategic mistakes? That's the question I've been trying to understand. And that question's interesting, of course, because if we understood the answer to that question, then it would help us to become better at strategizing in the real world. Now, in my research, what I do is I look for patterns and similarities in different teams' strategizing behavior. And sure enough, you can see them if you look carefully enough. To a large degree, the weaknesses of strategy making can be traced to flawed thinking, especially cognitive biases such as availability heuristics and confirmation biases. And these flaws are best understood in evolutionary terms. Now, you may have heard of Kahneman and Tversky, the Nobel Prize-winning researchers, who discovered that we evolved 2 different but complementary thinking systems. Thinking system 1, which is fast and instinctive and well adapted to getting away from predators in a hurry. System 2, which is slow, deliberative, and well adapted to our longer-term goals. The problem for brand teams is when we let our bias-ridden system 1 have too much influence on our strategizing, which really needs our best system 2 thinking. I see system 1 thinking in strategic planning all the time. Teams confuse disease categories with market segments because that data is more easily available than insight into hidden implicit patient needs. That's a form of availability bias. Then they assume that key opinion leaders are innovative because they're expert, an example of what's called a halo effect of cognitive bias. The funny thing is that teams often do this even when they're using textbook strategic planning tools that are meant to switch off system 1 and switch on system 2. For instance, they use Porter's 5 forces, but they still frame competitive pressure only in terms of direct rivalry. Or they might use the value proposition canvas, but they still do what they were going to do anyway, which is a form of hindsight bias. They use PEST or PESTLE or SLEPT, depending on the name they give it, but it doesn't work because it's applied with huge amounts of attentional bias. But just like the old aphorism about a bad workman blaming his tools, it's not the tools that are at fault here. So, if it's our instinct to think fast when we need to think slow that is messing up our strategizing, what can we do about it? Well, when I watch strategists working in real life, I can see that Kahneman and Tversky were, unsurprisingly for Nobel Prize winners, absolutely right. System 2, slow thinking, works better than System 1, fast thinking. And I can also see that the tools work in that they force System 1 thinking to disengage and System 2 thinking to take over. But I also see that this only happens when those tools are used correctly, and often they're not. The problem lies not with the tools, but with the people and the processes. You see, effective strategy teams prioritize training their people well so that they can use the tools well and they can engage with System 2 thinking. Less effective strategy teams just don't have the skills to use the teams well, so they fall back on System 1 thinking. Interestingly, this issue is made worse by superficial training and simplistic strategic planning templates. They let people think that they're using the tools and techniques of strategizing slowly and well, but in reality, they're just going through a tick box exercise. What happens, in effect, is they give strategists false confidence in their abilities. Those strategists think that they are strategizing well when they're not. This, of course, is a textbook example of another cognitive bias, the famous Dunning-Kruger effect. It's very different from the best companies who use the tools correctly and strategize slowly using System 2. And of course, the slower those companies strategize, the faster they execute on their strategies. So thanks for joining the seminar. I hope you found it worth your time, and if you have, please subscribe and like and share with your colleagues who are also interested in strategizing in our industry. If you'd like to read the supporting article, then please get in touch. If you'd like to browse through the 300, 400 other articles, papers and books that I've written about our industry, then take a look at my website. And if you'd like to know more about my research and how it can be applied in your case, then drop me a line, we'll set up a virtual cup of tea. I'd love to hear from you.